All right, you're very welcome back to Off the Ball this Tuesday evening. Neil Treacy with you for the next hour until 10 o'clock. It is time for the football show now, and I'm delighted to be joined by Irish independent football correspondent Daniel McDonnell. Dan, evening, Happy New Year. How are you?
Yeah, Neil, I'm all right. Yeah, I mean it's January as we know it, or maybe even a more grimmer January than some people normally know it. So yeah. It's we need some. If we didn't have sport, we'd be struggling at the moment, I think, wouldn't we?
We would big time.
Yeah, it is like it's normally, the Irish football community generally have a great way of getting through the January blues, right? So they normally the first weekend or the second weekend in January is when the football writers have their annual awards dinner, and it's actually almost like you have that Christmas lull, and then like the first weekend in January. First sort of proper weekend in January, it's almost like this brilliant reunion of all these people in football and an awards dinner and a night, and it gets everyone out and all. And I was just thinking earlier today, yeah, you really miss that from the normal January, but we'll struggle on. There's still football news to discuss anyway, so I see that, like, with the various news that's going on in the world. I think there's more cabinet stuff now. People are saying, it looks like we're going back to last April in many respects, but I suppose from the sports fans' perspective, that's not strictly true, because we still have football and a lot of other stuff to occupy us at least.
Yeah, I remember all those Saturdays when you would have been on the show with ourselves, yourself and Johnny Ward. I just distinctly remember back in that time, the amount of texters. There was at least one or two every single week who were texting in to say they were listening while painting a fence. I don't think there's any fence painting going on at the moment, because thankfully there actually are matches to watch at the moment.
But this is a problem, yeah. No, there was a lot of messages about cleaning the garage or painting a fence or something like that. And, we reviewed every World Cup I think we possibly could, with a couple of exceptions. So I don't know what we would actually do if football. I mean, we did discuss the Euros, didn't we? I mean, there was one stage, I know you were obviously very much involved in planning that I suppose there were times where we didn't know if football was going to come back. So in 2020 at all. So we'd run out of we were running out of our nostalgia angles. So maybe just people on their 5-kilometre walks are listening to us now. That's it, or their drives to essential shopping or whatever it might be.
Well, there is a new thing to sink your teeth into, because I do hope over the last few weeks, while you had your Christmas break, you were sinking your teeth in and researching as much as you could about the Cypriot First Division, because that is where the action is at the moment.
Yes, this is where it's at. Well, I mean, I've done some on-the-ground stuff on Cypriot football, thankfully, in the past, because this is a strange one now, because obviously we're talking about Jack Byrne, and Jack has joined APOEL Nicosia, and, it's a move that I would have endorsed as a good move. And I still, on balance, feel it's a good move, but obviously you might have, I think, done it before the break. I mean, they've lost again tonight, and all of a sudden there's chats about Mick McCarthy's position being vulnerable. And that's obviously not great, but it backs up one of the points I almost would have made in defence of the move. Like, the passion for football in Cyprus for club football is incredible. And it's partly one of the reasons why I would have said that, so the Cyprus 5, Ireland 2 in 2006, the Nightmare in Nicosia, as I was known at the time, and it was the first ever Ireland away trip that I did. That was obviously a national sort of scandal at home here. But the most galling thing about it was that actually people in Cyprus weren't interested in it at all. They didn't care about the national team, really. They all cared about their club team, and the taxi drivers, everyone, not interested in the match, but they are APOEL or Famagusta or whoever their team might be. And obviously a lot of them would support the Greek national team and some of the Greek teams as well. But like, there's a mad sort of passion for club football, and I was there a couple of years ago with Larnaca. I watched Dundalk play Larnaca, and like, the media coverage they get out there is unbelievable. And for some reason the press box was indoors, and so there was so many live commentary teams, and from doing the live commentaries from rugby now in a closed door stadium, like, if you've had the chance to go to a couple of them, all you can hear is other people commentating. And this was like this, except it was an indoor. It was almost like a stock room in New York or something, like 30, 40 people. And like, when people paused for half time, it was like that sort of end of this white noise. And even really weird one, like before the game and at halftime, the press officer wouldn't just be handing out the team sheets and sort of, wouldn't just be sort of doing that sort of more rudimentary jobs. The press officers were interviewed on TV before the game and at halftime, almost like, Kayleigh McEnany in the White House or something, like actually giving a presentation on behalf of the club or the team. So there's an insatiable appetite for their club football, but it's also then a really attritional environment for managers and for people who go into it, because if you have a couple of bad results, you come under this unbelievable pressure. And it does appear that Mick McCarthy has already landed himself there in a very, very short space of time. But APOEL are such a huge club, I can sort of understand it, because that's, to be where they are at the moment, which is down in the bottom nether regions of the table, for them is an absolute disaster for a club that was in the Champions League quarter-final not that long ago.
Yeah, and even I was kind of in between ad breaks as well while that match was going on. I was checking in, and there's a few of your kind of colleagues as well in the Irish football media who were kind of tweeting out the coverage of it, and it seems like the daggers are already out, it seems, for Mick McCarthy. There's a lot of kind of loose Google Translate jobs going on as well of tweets. It seems he's...
Yeah, there was one or two, yeah.
Had a big falling out with one player. There is a Gavin Cooney of the 42 that he did tweet quotes from Mick McCarthy after the game this evening, which it just seems quite ominous now. I'm embarrassed and shocked by our performance today. I'd like to think that the team that represents APOEL and represents me would have more quality, more fight, more desire and more determination. They're not quotes you expect to see a handful of games into a new job, is it?
No. Now, obviously he got the job in the first place because someone else before him was sacked, and that they were languishing in ninth. I think they were ninth when he took over.
And so 13 managers in 6 years, I think, is what they're on.
It's not a great, it's not a great run, all right. It's like a sort of a QPR during the 4-year plan type thing. But, I suppose Mick McCarthy's always had a reputation in English club football as someone that goes in and steadies the ship. Like at Ipswich, when he took over that time, it was sort of, again, they were having a bad season. And he came in and he galvanised them and straight away. But I guess he knew the terrain. And it's possible that he's inherited, as we engage into, massive speculation about the Cypriot club football characters of personalities and, applying stereotypes here. But he must be going into a dressing room. There's a sort of array of different nationalities in there, and clearly maybe there wasn't a great vibe there already. Hence, the previous person got the bullet. Yes, maybe has he found it harder to pull it together like he traditionally might in his English dressing room that he's managed for the entirety of his career, where I guess he can draw on certain things that he knows about both the team he inherits and the opposition even. Now, like Jack Byrne, I think they signed another guy, Joe Garner, an English striker. I mean, he couldn't do anything with the squad until the window officially opened, which was the other day. I mean, these deals were done. I mean, Jack Byrne's deal was basically done a while ago, really. It just there was obviously just red tape, and it didn't really matter because of the transfer window not opening. And the fact even that he's thrown Jack Byrne in off the bench tonight suggests that, Jack Byrne hadn't played since the cup final. He'd been on holiday. It's not as if he's had a rigorous, build up, like you normally would for a new signing. But clearly he wants him involved straight away. But he hasn't had time. Like you would have thought that at a normal club that hasn't got rid of 13 managers in 6 years, as you say, that almost the manager comes in and says, well, listen, I want to bring in some of my own men in January and let's see how they go, and that there would be a period of grace. That, well, let's see what these lads can do. But it's such a volatile environment there. It doesn't necessarily seem guaranteed that he's going to be given that opportunity, because the powers that be are under that pressure. And I don't know. Like, we are reading, as I said, translated stuff of stories, and the media frenzy there is such that I can imagine that speculation is there from the start anyway. But if there's something to it, it's obviously slightly worrying. I mean, listen, I've big faith in Jack Byrne's ability that, if we're speculating again about a scenario here, but if there was a case where the manager went, I think a new manager coming in would see, that he's got loads of ability. And one of the reasons that I sort of felt it was a good move for him is that I think that the style of play there will actually really suit Jack Byrne. And he can, that is a good play for him to try and go onto that circuit. Having seen him play at Europa League level for Shamrock Rovers, including against Apollon Limassol, one of the top teams in Cyprus, 2019 it was now, and Jack Byrne, like the best player on the pitch probably in both games, certainly the first game against them. And you're thinking, yes, in this sort of style where it's quite technical and you will get time on the ball against these opponents, I think he can thrive there. But obviously the manager that brought him there being in jeopardy is a concern.
Yeah, just to interrupt on that very quick, there has been a second goal in the Spurs-Brentford game in the semi-finals of the League Cup just in the last minute or so. Son Heung-min has scored Spurs' second of the evening. Lovely little ball, through ball from Ndombele. Son outpacing the Brentford defence and just from the edge of the area, firing it up above the keeper into the roof of the net. Lovely finish. Spurs 2-0 up, although it could have been 1-1 a few minutes ago because Brentford had a goal disallowed. Ivan Toney scored, but it went to VAR, and the last little layer of epidermis on his knee seems to be offside, and the goal was ruled out. So Spurs 2-0 up, 20 minutes left to play in that game, and we'll keep you updated as it goes. Dan, just before we move on from Jack Byrne as well, like we were kind of talking there about how this is far from a safe move for Jack Byrne because it's a volatile club at the moment with managers, and you wouldn't know who could come in, whether it's in a few months' time or a few weeks' time or whatever, and whether or not that manager fancies him, or he could absolutely love him and he could thrive. But I think what interests so many fans in Ireland about the move as well is that it's those very reasons. It's that it's not a safe move, and it's not the kind of well-worn road that Irish players have taken down the years.
Yeah, and how many times do we play international teams? Do Ireland play international teams? And you'll come up against players, like you're looking at these really skillful sort of, players on the opposing side who've had a career sort of on the European circuit, who played in various different leagues. And the sort of the teams in the British Isles as such, and lump ourselves into it, like they're almost outliers in the sense that they have an international team pretty much consisting of players all playing in one league, say, all in England, Scotland to be a bit of a mixed bag, Wales, again, primarily England, and Northern Ireland and ourselves, all very much from a similar system. And we play Denmark and teams like that, a bit of players from 13, 14 different leagues, experiencing all different cultures and environments. And often, that climate of European, football, top level football in certain leagues can be more of easily translatable to international football in terms of the style than maybe going from, the Championship or League One, which are great leagues, very competitive, much more technical than they used to be in terms of a perception of it. But I think there's certainly, a real value in our players trying that move. And I certainly would have, I think there was a certain degree of people just hearing Cyprus and not being aware of what a huge league and, industry and club it is out there. But also I think football wise, I still think that the idea of going there for Jack Byrne is a better idea than, say, going to a club in the Championship, as he's done in the past, who play a style that doesn't suit him, who play a formation that doesn't suit him, who at various times in England, he ended up on the right of a 4-5-1 or, in a very different type of system. Now, again, he also struggled from managers who brought him leaving very quickly. And that's the parallel, unfortunately, that you might see happening again here. But more so the fact that the club didn't play in a way that suited him. And Jack Byrne is quite a particular type of player that needs a team that is really built around it, that needs a sort of a number 10 in his sort of mould. And it's not necessarily the case that a lot of clubs in England are playing that way. We've even discussed this recently, I think, with one of the Saturdays, it might have been with Gary Breen, I'm not sure who we discussed it with, was about how the role of the number 10 maybe in English football and generally is beginning to change a small bit, and that you'll have a number 10 such as Alan Brown at Preston, and he's played there with Ireland, who actually is probably pressing from the front, does more running than anybody else on the pitch. And, there's almost an aggression and there's a certain demand from them to do those roles. whereas maybe on the continent you might still have a more old school number 10, where they're the playmaker who can sort of drop deep and get things going. And I think we've seen Jack Byrne in Holland do very well. We've seen him in Europa League games do very well. And I think the idea of him playing in the European League, that will potentially suit him better than a lot of the way that clubs in England operate. And that's why I think, it made sense. And there was a view that Mick McCarthy, might necessarily always have the, regarded as someone who loves like free-flowing football as such, although some of his teams have played good football, but he also has a very good sort of caring streak and looks out for people. And I think Jack Byrne sort of probably needs that arm around the shoulder sometimes a bit. So obviously, the natural concern would be if there was a change, what type of character comes in. But I still firmly believe that football-wise, it's a good fit for him. But we'll just have to see, unfortunately, how it pans out from, I think they have a game again in 3 days' time.
Saturday, yeah.
And I think it was initially thought that would be his most likely debut game. Obviously, it's been brought forward, Jack Byrne, that is. But I kind of wonder after a couple of days' training, does the new manager need to suddenly, does Mick suddenly need to throw his signings in and hope that they prove he knows what he's doing?
Yeah, as you say, very, very early days. So, like, literally only 5 minutes in at this stage into his career at the club. So we're going to see more. And we're going to be keeping a close eye on Cyprus. Very quickly, I'm just going to jump away because we have an update from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Just some more details on that second Spurs goal from Joe Rawson.
Tottenham 2, Brentford 0. Surely Jose Mourinho is taking Spurs to a League Cup final now. Heung-min Son has doubled their lead after he was put through by Ndombele. Through one-on-one, he kept his composure and smashed it past the goalkeeper, Raya, right-footed. It's harsh on Brentford, who have been far better than they were in the first 45 in this second period, and they had a goal ruled out for VAR, headed home by Ivan Toney from inside the 6-yard box, but on closer inspection, he was millimetres just offside, and the goal was ruled out. Tottenham 2, Brentford 0.
Yeah, so Spurs 2-0 up, winner to take on either Man United or Man City in the final in April. They're going to play their semi-final tomorrow evening. Dan, a couple of minutes ago while you were talking about Jack Byrne, you mentioned Preston. Now, in the last, less than in the last hour, I think, they've announced the signing, on loan at least, of Jason Malumbi.
Yeah, I just saw that news there, all right. Yeah, I mean, it's Addison, I think it's probably a good move for him. I think it's a slight disappointment that he hasn't played as much as Brighton as you might have maybe expected when they didn't let him go on loan at the start of the season. Because, he obviously had such a very successful loan at Millwall last year. And the natural hope is that you go back to your parent club and you press on. And he's made a couple of appearances, but late off the bench. He's not his Premier League debut, but it was only for a couple of minutes. And I suppose Brighton are in a relegation battle, and it's become clear probably that he's not going to get the opportunities that he needs to keep developing. So, Preston are competitive in the Championship. They sort of, we spoke about, I suppose, styles before and how the style of play might suit particular players. I think Preston is probably a good fit for Malumbi in the sense of how an Alex Neil team operates in terms of their midfielders. I spoke with Alan Brown. It can be quite aggressive and quite positive, and you need to work hard and cover a lot of ground. I think Malumbi, we've seen with Ireland, we've seen more of him with Ireland than we have with Brighton. Really, he's got great attributes that you think would be very much suited to a team that really works very hard and looks for their midfielders to be aggressive and to put pressure on the opponents and be really positive and drive on. And you'd imagine he'd be going there to play and to go into a really competitive run-in, with something to play for. I mean, there's broader questions about where does he stand with Brighton after letting him go 2 years in a row. But I suppose the top half of the Championship is still an extremely good level. So we'll see if he can make an impact there again. I mean, he's been welcomed the Preston fans are delighted because his reputation from Millwall is very high.
And he was kind of just in that tricky spot with Brighton at the start of this season, where he was obviously rated high enough by Graham Potter that he he had an idea that he wanted to have him in some way involved in the team, or that he was close to being involved in the first team. But unfortunately, he wasn't rated high enough that he was going to be doing it regularly. So he probably didn't feel comfortable letting him go at the start of the season, just in case there was an injury or two, and he needs to use him a lot more.
Yeah, I suppose in some ways it's a compliment to him that he was kept around. It's a bit like the Queeveen Kelleher situation, that he was kept around, because they were worried about Alisson, and they rated him high enough that they didn't want to let him go and not have him. But obviously the trade-off for that is that you don't play. And certainly, for Malumbi with his age now, haven't even in his younger years lost a small bit of time due to injury. He just needs to be involved and to play. And I don't know, he's, Graham Potter obviously likes a certain type of midfielder, and you kind of wonder, is Malumbi 100% going to be a perfect fit for a Graham Potter Brighton side? You can speculate around that maybe, but I also think we've seen with Ireland actually. I've been really impressed by him at times. I think the game against Wales, I think Stephen Kenny spoke before about the chaotic energy that he brings, but I think he wanted to clarify that afterwards, because that almost suggests that there's no thought behind it. And actually, you see at Malumbi at times, his passing can be quite crisp, and he can do things quickly, and maybe in the final third at times he could be a small bit better, but he's actually a very, very sort of good all-round midfielder. And the fact that he was able to play a full season at Millwall, there was fans there for a portion of that in quite a demanding environment, and cope with it, sort of speaks to his character. So, if it turns out at this stage of his career, if all he can do is thrive at the top level of the Championship, that's still a very, very good level for a player of his age. And you got to think that eventually, he will be operating at Premier League level. But whether that is, does he need to almost go out somewhere else and earn his reputation to get back there that way? It's possible that might be his route. It's possible.
Yeah, definitely possible. And I'm sure Stephen Kenny is someone who's absolutely delighted to see that news this evening. Another Jason I want to speak about as well, Jason Knight. He's someone who's been spoken about in the last couple of days as well. By all accounts, it seems that there's possibly a handful of Premier League teams looking for him. Newcastle have been linked, Crystal Palace, West Ham, and there was one other club as well, Burnley as well, who've been linked to him. He's someone who is clearly highly rated. Derby County I think up until this season, I saw a stat there this evening that he had played the most minutes out of anyone, I think, in the Derby County team. Yeah,
managed by Wayne Rooney now, which I'm sure is a very interesting life experience for him, having had Philippe Cocu as well. And Frank Lampard actually was the one who brought him into the squad initially. So even in a short space of time, he's worked under some big names. I haven't been, I've been sort of off work as such, in the sense that I haven't been following this transfer story to know if there's sort of if there's something in it, or sometimes this stuff is just reflecting his new status, and it can be a contract play sometimes, and then you suddenly find out that one of Derby's most important players is paid like it, whereas obviously coming through from the academy you'll always be at the lower end of the scale. But I think he's got a terrific chance. From everything I've seen of him, but possibly more so what I've heard about him from people who really know him and really know his character. And we will talk about talented teenagers all the time on this show, but then you might hear whispers here and there that maybe, attitude-wise, there's question marks about this person or that person. Whereas with Knight, that does not appear to be the case at all. And that's, similar to Nathan Collins at Stoke would be another in that bracket, that gives you a real confidence that whatever step that they're at the moment, they are going to keep going up. And sometimes the talented teams, they hit a high level early and then they burn out because, they can't handle, the first contract or whatever it is that comes for them. So, he does appear to be one of the most exciting young attacking midfielders in the Championship. He's at a club that has had financial, I suppose, question marks around it. And yeah, there would be something wrong if Premier League clubs weren't looking at him. To the extent to which this leads to something actually happening, I'm not so sure. But he's certainly one. you know, who may not have the profile of some of our other players of that generation, but he could easily turn out to be. I mean, he could end up being the best of them, you know, and that's. I mean, that's the thing. It's not always the outstanding one at 17, 18 that is the pick of the crop. You know, I'd make this point before that, you know, Seamus Coleman and a lot of other people are outstanding players, were never the pick of the litter as such when they were 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, Knight is obviously at a far higher level than Coleman was then, but he's certainly one that he was actually likened a small bit to Lampard when he was younger, because for people who haven't seen him, like, he's a very hard-working midfielder, covers a lot of ground, but one thing that people really like about him is his ability to get into goal-scoring positions, to really get into the box and anticipate when to get on the end of things. And you know, that was why with Lampard spotted him initially, he sort of saw something in him. And I think we'd, you know, it's a lofty comparison, but we'd take someone of that ilk, I think. Yeah,
certainly looks like it. He's got an interesting decision to make, maybe, and it looks like a decent future ahead of him. Now, there has been an incident at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. There has been a red card. Spurs looking good now for a place in the League Cup final. With the details of this red card, Joe Rawson.
Tottenham 2, Brentford 0, but Brentford's night has just gone from bad to worse. They are down to 10 men. Josh De Silva has been shown a straight red card for an awful high challenge on Pierre Højbjerg. Mike Dean was asked to go and look at the VAR screen to review the tackle after missing it initially, and I'm just looking at pictures of Højbjerg's shin. He has his sock rolled down his leg, and there is an awful gash on his shin from where he's been caught from the poor challenge. Mike Dean was asked to look at the VAR review screen. After one look at it, he decided to produce a red card. Right decision. Josh De Silva sent off. Tottenham 2, Brentford 0.
Yeah, VAR has taken a bit of a kicking in the last season or so, but that was one of the more clear and obvious decisions a referee has been able to overturn on the pitch. So Brentford down to 10 men, and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has gone off the pitch as well. The blood was pouring down his shin after that awful tackle. Got the studs right onto the shin as well. So Spurs looking good though, 2-0 up with 3 minutes plus injury time left to play. We're going to take a quick break here on Off the Ball, but coming up on the Football Show, we'll have more with Dan.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power. New normal, same old football. Paddy Power. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Moncrief.
I got a very brief sex talk from my father, and I'll never forget it. Sow your wild oats of an evening and pray for crop failure in the morning. Yes, that's very wise.
Moncrief. Weekdays from 2 p.m. on News Talk.
At Volkswagen Financial Services, our solutions are expertly engineered to put you in the driving seat. Choose the flexibility of PCP, low-cost HP finance, or the convenience of leasing. Add extras like servicing and maintenance plans. For Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, Seat, or Volkswagen commercial vehicles, discover financing options that match your needs and your budget. Talk to your local dealer or visit vwfs.ie/affordability. Volkswagen Financial Services. Affordability engineered for you. Finance provided by Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland. Subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply.
In secondary school, I really liked most of my subjects, but I especially liked maths. I loved the logic of it and how there was always a way of finding the right answer. The way Mr. Mack explained things just made it all click. I'm Lucy Nyland, and I'm hoping to share my passion for maths with my own students after I qualify as a teacher this year.
Teaching transforms. The closing dates for the Professional Master of Education courses are approaching. For more, see gov.ie/teaching transforms.
When you get enough people together, you can achieve almost anything. Send someone like me into space, or create change on the ground. People power, strength in numbers, whatever you want to call it, it works.
Together with over 1 million homes and businesses already with Electric Ireland, we're making changes for a brighter energy future. Be part of the change at electricireland.ie.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power. Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
All right, you're very welcome back to Off the Ball this evening. Neil Treacy with you at the moment in the company of Dan McDonnell, football correspondent with the Irish Independent. Spurs still 2-0 up on Brentford, heading into injury time at the end of the game in their League Cup semi-final. So Spurs looking good now for a place in the League Cup final, where they're going to take on either Manchester United or Manchester City in April. We're going to turn our attentions to Premier League now, because yesterday's defeat for Liverpool against Southampton has really blown things open, and indeed Liverpool's draws over the previous week as well with West Brom and Newcastle, and added to that Man United's good recent form and the form of Man City, where they beat Chelsea at the weekend just gone. It looks like we might actually have some bit of a decent title race coming up this season after Liverpool ran away with things last season. Before we chat a little bit more about it ourselves, we're just going to listen to some of David Myler, who was on with the lads on OTB AM this morning, and he outlined just what went wrong for Liverpool last night.
I wouldn't usually say this, but I think Jurgen Klopp got it wrong last night with the midfield he selected. Obviously, bent Jordan Henderson as centre back. I think he was massively missed. I think it was just, look, Southampton are in good form. Do you know what I mean? Ever since, their 9-0 loss against Leicester, they've been, on this kind of upward, I don't even know what the word is, but they've just been so positive. And, I just think Liverpool played right into their hands last night, and they didn't start well. And then once Southampton got the goal, Liverpool in the first half just looked like nothing they could do could go right. Like, I think, to sum it up, the stat of Trent Alexander-Arnold giving away the ball 38 times in the game, which is unheard of. That, I was flabbergasted when I heard, and I think that just summed up Liverpool's performance, waiting till the 70-odd minute to get their first shot on target. It was a really bad performance, but look, Jurgen's a well-experienced manager. He's a top-class, manager. There's no doubt that he'll get the troops going again, because they have to pick themselves up, because the last 3 results haven't been good enough.
How big an impact? Sorry, Jared. That's impact you talk about there of Jordan Henderson playing at centre back. So, say in an alternate reality, they actually start Williams or Phillips at centre back last night. How much of an added impetus does he give, rather than a semi-fit Thiago or Oxlade-Chamberlain last night, in terms of chances created, David? Do we underrate him sometimes in terms of the possession and the good possession that they have in the opposition third?
It's not just the possession I would look at. Certainly, Thiago is probably better in his passing than Henderson is. I think the big thing that was missed in the middle was probably his leadership, his organisation. The level of intensity he brings to his pressing, his closing down, and then the big thing that has always been noted is the fact that when Trent Alexander-Arnold wants to get forward, Henderson is the first to kind of tuck around on that side. And if you actually watched the game back last night, there was times when the ball was played into Thiago and he's popping it out to the fullbacks, first time. But they were receiving the ball probably 10, 15 yards short of where they were usually, where they're, higher up the pitch over the halfway line, so they can inevitably pin, Southampton back. We did seem to see a lot of it more in the second half. But of course, that's always going to happen after the first half performance. There was going to be a reaction. You can imagine Jurgen Klopp is going to have a few things to say.
Well, are you legitimately worried, David, that this could actually go the way of Manchester United this season? Is there a real sustained title challenge going to come from Old Trafford?
I think they'll be thereabouts, but I don't think they'll win the league. The one for me, it would be Manchester City. Obviously, their performance the other day was very good, and I do feel that they've been miles off it for Man City. But can they follow it up with 2 or 3 performances? I do think they can. I think City are the team now that will actually go on and win probably 5, 6, 7 in a row. Look, Aguero's coming back, which has been the big thing for them to, getting goals. I do think United will be up there, but I still think it will be, Liverpool, City 1 and 2. I think a lot of people won't like that, but I just can't see Manchester United. Everything is going for them at the moment. Look, if they go and beat Liverpool with a top class performance, then I'll come on here and I'll apologise and say, do you know what, they're genuine title contenders. But I don't know, is it the Liverpool fan in me that just doesn't want to admit it? But I can't see them winning the title now.
Well, let's isolate that down into Manchester United against Liverpool in a few weeks' time. How worried are you about that particular fixture?
I wouldn't say I'm worried. you've got, if you're a Manchester United player, it's a game that you're excited for, you're looking forward to. You want to be playing in those types of games. Certainly Liverpool haven't been on the run, but it was quite interesting, something slightly different. But, you know, obviously Jordan came out yesterday after the game and he did his post-match interview, and he mentioned, you know, usually with him it's always the next game is the most important game. And he said, well, we've got Aston Villa in the FA Cup and then we've got Manchester United, which I can't remember for the love of me him, you know, mentioning 2 games as the next 2 games. So it obviously is in their mind. So you can tell that there was probably said something like, you know, you don't know if something was said, but there might have been something said like as in, we can't play like this against Manchester United. We need to be better. So I fully expect Liverpool to, you know, whether or not they chop and change for the FA Cup, but I expect them to turn up, you know, when they play Manchester United, and I expect Liverpool to beat them.
Dan, obviously we don't know who's going to win the Premier League. We're still only approaching the midway stage of it, but I'm actually just delighted that it seems like we might actually have a solid title race with maybe even a 3-way title race.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unusual how open it's become, and I don't know, like, I've read some interesting stuff in the last couple of days, you know, various theories put forward, and you kind of wonder, you know, is this sort of closed doors environment, like it's a full season of it, like this, I know we had temporary, you know, a couple of thousand people at certain games and so on, and they made a certain difference, but like you're basically having a full season not influenced by any of those factors, and even, you know, in Liverpool's win last year, there was a huge, you know, there was a normality to the business end of the season, whereas now it just looks very flat for a lot of teams, you know, and I genuinely think that even just the normal levels of sort of motivation and desire and stuff aren't there, and like the form book as a result. And I'm not even saying that, like, you know, the people are chucking it in and that there's no intention or desire there. I think it's just a natural product of it. And I've been to a lot of these closed doors games at home here and Europa League stuff with Dundalk and Ireland games, and they're not really proper games. You know, I mean, like, you know, they are okay. I know they are in terms of the importance, and we've seen some very high octane, very, you know, high intensity ones. But certainly it's something I've really found during this sort of period that, and maybe it's a bit of a sort of a, you know, a journalist with notions about themselves saying these things, but when you go to games more, you get more of a feel for it, and the extent to which these games really aren't, like, if you're watching at home on TV, maybe it doesn't come across as much if you normally consume a lot of games watching them on TV, but I really just don't think that they're the real thing. I think as a consequence, and also as well the schedule, I mean the scheduling too, the fact that the turnaround was pretty tight, you know, they're staggering the games in such a way that it's not normal really relative to the pace and the rhythm of a normal season. And I think all of those factors are aligning to make everyone a bit inconsistent, make everyone a small bit unreliable. And like, it is open, and you say 3 teams, and you're probably right, you know, but really, it wouldn't take like a mad turn of events for, you know, one of the other teams that you're probably not considering in that 3. So I guess you're probably talking about Liverpool, Man United, and Man City, but like, it actually wouldn't be absolutely beyond the realms of possibility that like a Spurs or Leicester or someone, you know, can actually have a very strong run in, and you don't know like how many points it actually needs to really be in the shake-up, because there's no one that's ultra reliable. So it is quite entertaining, but like sort of quality-wise, some of the games for me, I don't know, like, you know, like the Liverpool was sort of compelling last night to some degree that they're struggling, but you're definitely watching a very diminished version of the real thing. And I think you're getting that with a lot of teams, a lot of weeks.
Yeah, no, I 100% get that, you know, the product probably isn't as good as it was in previous seasons, but I think the trade-off is that the probably season as a whole is maybe a little bit more entertaining, and the storylines around it are probably a little bit more entertaining, whereas, you know, if it wasn't for Liverpool going for their first title in 30 years last season, we would have had basically nothing to talk about for, like, if COVID hadn't even happened, we would have had nothing to talk about pretty much from January onwards last season.
No, and I totally accept that point, and I think that like certainly there's a trade-off involved, and that you will probably get to, April, and there will be sort of possibilities abound, that you wouldn't normally have, and that will eventually grab people, even if you have a situation where, like, think of all the title races that you've, you remember at times, and like, the last day ones, and it's all about the crowds and the that sort of natural noise and emotion. And it's different, but like we had this actually in the championship last season with Leeds and West Brom, and there was still, even though there was massive stuff at stake, the pressure got on top of people, and you could see it. Like you'd see, mistakes made at vital times, and you didn't need a full stadium to have that tension. But it's a strange one that you're taught. You have a team like Manchester United, for example, in the Shake-Up, who've been in crisis maybe 3 games ago, and it sort of feels like the crisis baton has been sort of passed along like a 4x100 relay, from one team to the next. And Arsenal all of a sudden, from being relegation contenders, are now they're probably closer points wise than they have been at any point in the recent 5 years or something.
Six points off the top 4, only Dan. 6 points off the top 4.
There you go. Like 6 points. As Mick McCarthy would say, if you'd offered me that at the start of the season, I would have bitten your hand off at this stage. And there's a lot of managers that will be able to like, the managerial spin is like fantastic, is a fantastic thing. And the amount of managers now in the Premier League would say, well, actually, West Ham, Everton, whoever, well, we're only X points off the top 4. We would have taken that. But it's listen, you are right. That like I think the payoff will be the excitement that comes at the end when it's not clear cut. But I think some of the games are quite underwhelming at the moment for me. But I mean, maybe if you're very invested in who wins it, you're not finding it that way. But it's certainly like there's plot twists galore to come, and you just hope that like come the end of it, there will be sort of spectators to some degree involved. But you sort of wonder, are we going to have a little break soon as well, which is the other talking point, I suppose, in the COVID context. Not to drag us down that road.
Yeah.
It is certainly, while everything else is shutting down, you do think that the Premier League is going to come still under. I think was there pep in the news round earlier on, and there's various people talking about it. That maybe is where the discussion point might still go a small bit.
Yeah, possibly. Very quickly, I'm just going to break away because we have a full-time report from the League Cup semi-final between Spurs and Brentford, and Spurs through to the final with the details from full-time at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Joe Rawson.
Full-time, Tottenham 2, Brentford 0 as the song Spurs are on their way to Wembley booms out around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They are off to the showpiece of a major tournament for the first time under Jose Mourinho. Moussa Sissoko's header gave them a first half lead, but the Bees had thought they'd equalise midway through the second period. Ivan Toney heading in, but VAR ruled it out for offside, and then Heung-min Son made sure of Tottenham's place at Wembley with his 16th goal of the season. Brentford's night went from bad to worse as Josh De Silva was rightly shown a straight red card for an awful high challenge on Pierre Højbjerg. Spurs will play one of the Manchester clubs in the final. Full-time, Tottenham 2, Brentford 0.
Now, just quickly before we skip off Liverpool, I do just want to play a clip of Jurgen Klopp last night because he had plenty to say about some decisions in his post-match press conference.
What Andrew Mariner did with Sadio Mane tonight, I'm not sure if that's still okay, to be honest. So, like, the boy tried absolutely everything. Were a few great challenges with Walker Bros, but there were a lot of situations which should have been free kicks as well. And then the last situation when he goes down, if you see that back in the box, he hits him in the end with his left foot, and that's another penalty. So we cannot change it. I heard now that Man United had more penalties in 2 years since Order is there than I had in 5.5 years. I have no idea if it's my fault or I don't know how that can happen. But that's no excuse for the performance of tonight, because that's something we can change. The rest we cannot change. We just have to respect the decisions.
So that was Jurgen Klopp. Dan, I think in 2 or 3 years' time, if I'm ever off on some random Wednesday afternoon and I'm watching the 2020-21 Premier League years on Sky Sports. I'm going to hear this clip, and straight afterwards I'm going to be shown footage of a controversial penalty incident at Old Trafford on the 17th of January involving either Liverpool or Man United.
Listen, it's classic managerial pressure. I mean, there's a big dose of Fergie about Klopp sometimes, isn't he? He's like Fergie with a different setting, you know. It's like Fergie with a more, it's like, you know, let's push the dial to more upbeat, sort of jovial. But listen, but that's what makes him what he is. Like he's a great manager. He's a terrible loser. And like you generally you don't want a manager to be given the compliment as a good loser. You know, he's a very good loser. And he's exerting pressure in his own way. And you know, all managers do that to some degree. And they will get their payoff, you know, or not, you know, depending on how effective that is. I mean, it's some do it with a smile, some do it with a snarl, but the sort of psychology is the same.
Yeah, and I think you kind of get the feel. I don't think it's any coincidence that it's coming just before. Well, I say just before. It's in 2 weeks, but it's their next league game is coming up against United. I reckon that regardless of what happened last night in the Southampton game, there were some questionable decisions in that, but I'm almost certain at some stage in the next 2 weeks, Jurgen Klopp had that little tidbit ready to go in his back pocket to throw out a press conference that, oh, well, in those years, you know, in the years since I've been here, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has already had more penalties than me.
Yeah, I suppose the one thing, though, like in the VAR era, though, it's harder to really get the, you know,
yeah,
like, do you know what I mean? It's like the only way you could say that his you know, he's had some impact is if we see a VAR that's blatantly not a penalty in any shape or form, and like the TV just gets turned off, you know, and the penalties are like, you know, it is harder to build that angle. It is true, but there's been more penalties awarded in the league in general since VAR has come in, and like that's it's as much as we will argue over certain decisions and you know the clear and obvious and how, you know, how at times certain things could have gone in a particular way. Generally, like it's harder for your pressure to pay off. So actually, maybe, do you know what? Maybe he's just wasting his time. Maybe he's just completely wasting his time.
Yeah, possibly. We're probably down to our last couple of minutes here, but one thing I even want to say, you touched on obviously as well, but the sheer number of positive results being returned by Premier League sides. So 28 last week, followed by 12. 40 in the last 2 weeks, or in the last week. So it was 28 a few days ago, further 12 now out of just over 2,000 cases. And I think the one thing that really just put a shiver up my spine, Dan, trending today on Twitter was null and void.
Oh, that's never good, is it? And like, you know, but you do see in the lower leagues in England like a raft of postponements now, and I think was it the Rochdale or someone at Rochdale was saying they're just going to have to suspend it, and then I don't think the authorities are willing to countenance that at the moment. And listen, everyone's struggling to some degree at the moment, and no one wants doom and gloom, you know. But obviously, we've seen with schools and various things both here and England, everyone's, you know. People will say, well, they're never going to be closed. No. And then the weight of pressure is such that people just need, like, it moves on to the next thing. And, like, football, there's no doubt that while it's, you know, providing fantastic entertainment and outlet for people, it is always going to be in danger of being the next thing as more and more things get shut down and the picture doesn't improve. And certainly, you know, we will see, I mean, ultimately the momentum, if there is going to be momentum, it'll be driven probably by players, really, and coaches and managers. If people are coming out to say that they feel unsafe or they're alarmed or concerned by it, that's where the debate goes, and that's where the discussion goes. We haven't really seen that so far. Just, you know, isolated instances, and you know, in fact, you've seen some players let themselves down, you know, in terms of how they've you know, which doesn't help, you know, which definitely doesn't help in terms of goodwill. But it does feel like, you know, there's the whole circuit breaker idea that's been mentioned. Like, you wouldn't want to rule it out.
Yeah.
You know, but it's we need something more uplifting to finish on, Neil. But it's not really. We can't avoid it, really, can we?
No, unfortunately, we don't have time even to put in something more uplifting. So we'll come back to another time.
Play a funny clip or something. I don't know.
JP's gonna get something lined up. Dan, thanks a million for joining us this evening, and Happy New Year again.
Thanks, Neil. Have a good one.
Time for a quick break.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power. New normal.